I think the president's inclined to accept the agreement, move on, and try to find money elsewhere, and most likely declare an emergency, I think, is generally the plan, but you really don't know until you get the details of the bill.
He discussed that with you. The national emergency is still on the table. He's inclined.
It's definitely on the table. I'll let him tell you whether or not he's going to do it, but he's very inclined to go that route.
Just a casual toss-off reference there in the hallway. Lindsey Graham today saying his buddy, the president, is inclined to accept a bipartisan agreement to avoid this looming shutdown and perhaps declare a national emergency to fund his border wall. Today, multiple sources told NBC News the president is, in fact, likely to sign that deal. They also quickly cautioned there's nothing set in stone because this White House has yet to see anything in writing, among other things. We just learned the final text of the legislation has been completed at long last. We're waiting for it to be released. Senate is expected to vote first on the bill tomorrow, then the House. This morning, Trump said he would be scanning the compromise for any hidden surprises.
We haven't gotten it yet. We'll be getting it. We'll be looking for landmines, because you could have that. You know, it's been known to happen before to people, but we're in very good shape, and we're going to take a look at it when it comes. I don't want to see a shutdown. Shutdown would be a terrible thing.
NBC News reports this compromise agreement, quote, provides nearly $1.4 billion for 55 miles of new border fencing, which could include steel slats and other existing technologies. During an afternoon event with law enforcement, Trump again repeated his claim the wall is being built.
The wall is very, very on its way. It's happening as we speak. We're building as we speak in the most desperately needed areas. And it's a big wall. It's a strong wall. It's a wall that people aren't going through very easy. They're going to have to be in extremely good shape to get over this one. They would be able to climb Mount Everest a lot easier, I think.
Not everybody agrees with that. Today, Ann Coulter, for one, was back at it, trolling the president, quote, announcing the Trump border trellis. Not just a garden trellis. It might extend for yards and yards. And let's not forget there's still Rick Wilson's compromise suggestion of a freedom ditch. With us to talk about all of it, Philip Rucker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House bureau chief for The Washington Post, and Eliza Collins, politics reporter for USA Today, who covers Congress for a living. Phil, take us inside the West Wing. I know the wall is very, very on its way. What's going on, you think, inside?
Well, Brian, there's a realization inside, including by the president, that the 35-day shutdown of December and January was a political loser for him. So there's nobody, really nobody, who's encouraging the president to have a second shutdown and continue this fight with Congress over the border wall. So what they're preparing to do is for the president to sign this spending bill once it reaches his desk later this week, and then try to take executive action to secure more funding, more money, reallocating more dollars towards that wall, and put on a public relations show to try to claim this as a victory. But the president knows it's not anywhere near the $5.7 billion that he was demanding for Congress. And this is really something of a political defeat for him, not being able to get more money from Congress for the wall.
Eliza, is it fair to cast this in Hanna-Barbera terms and say that the folks on Capitol Hill are anxious to maybe just gently pull the pin out of this grenade, get it passed, and toss it down Pennsylvania Avenue?
I think so, and I think that's why you're seeing people on both sides saying, yep, we're pretty okay with this deal, even though we haven't seen text yet. We're seeing this bill rush through. Of course, this has to be on the president's desk before Friday at midnight because part of the government would lose funding after that. So we'll see the Senate move tomorrow, then the House, and they're just kind of trying to move things along, really hoping that the president doesn't change his mind at the last minute, which he has done before.
Now, Eliza, it's if you're a viewer of broadcasts like Bill Maher, you know that the left has fun referring to President Coulter. There is that pressure on this president on the right. There is Ann Coulter, there's Sean Hannity, there's others at Fox News who he listens to and cares about, and then there's Mark Meadows of the House Freedom Caucus. Let us in on their thinking and how this could still gnaw at and influence the president.
Well, this is the group that helped him into that first shutdown. They were advising him not to take a temporary funding bill. They said, you should shut the government down. This is an issue you ran on. This is one of the most important issues you ran on, and you really need to go to the mat for this. Of course, the president did take the shutdown, 35 days, and then he ended up signing a temporary funding bill to get out of it because it looked like there was no other way out. That group was sort of cautiously optimistic at that point. They said, okay, sign this bill, but you better get something the next time. They're not happy with what he's gotten this time. And Ann Coulter, Sean Hannity, they've been very vocal about that. Now, Mark Meadows is a little bit different because he is a member of Congress. He said he's not going to support the bill himself. He sort of went after it earlier this week, but today he had changed his tune a little bit. I was texting with him earlier today, and he basically said that if the president were to sign this bill, just as long as he was going to do something else to get the rest of that money, possibly an emergency declaration, which Meadows said he would support, or Republicans are talking about finding other funds to allocate. They're not quite clear on how that would be. The base would forgive the president on this and basically avoid the shutdown. They all know that the president was blamed in polling for the shutdown. So Meadows was sort of giving Trump an out, even if he didn't personally support the bill.
Phil Rucker, I wasn't great at globes and maps, but I know 55 miles ain't no sea to shining sea.
Doesn't go very far.
What's the chance that by this weekend we're going to hear words like an emergency declaration or an executive action?
I think pretty high, Brian. The president traveled down to El Paso on Monday. It was a long trip aboard Air Force One, about 4 hours, three to 4 hours each way. And on board the trip was the White House counsel. Now, White House lawyers don't usually travel to campaign rallies with the president, but Pat Cipollone was on board the plane, presumably going over a lot of this paperwork and talking the president through what his legal options would be for any sort of executive action. It's a pretty complicated step. It's not just flipping a switch, but there are all different pots of money that have to be triggered at various points, and there's a legal protocol to protect the administration from a challenge in the courts. And I think that's a sign that the president's preparing to make an announcement. And I wouldn't be surprised if, while he's signing this bill on Friday, he's simultaneously announcing that he's going to be taking some sort of executive action. That's what some of his advisors are encouraging him to do. And it's a way for him to show his political supporters out in the country that he's going to keep fighting for the wall.
So, Phil, you wouldn't be surprised to take Eliza's point and what we're reading in a competing newspaper tonight, that the White House is calling people with names like Hannity and Dobbs just to try to rally support among people whose opinion matters to the president.
It matters a great deal to the president, and part of what the president's trying to avoid is to make this look like a defeat or a concession to his supporters around the country. They've been hearing about the wall now for more than 3 years since he launched his campaign, and it's time that he shows some results and some action. And so that's what the administration's trying to sort of rally the cable hosts and others to get behind.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.